Hi, this is Fernando Granados Cuellar, and this PowerPoint is a rhetorical analysis of the chapter by Cal Penn in the book American Like Me. The chapter starts off with an introduction of the author, Cal Penn. The introduction lists him as being an actor, producer, and former Obama White House aide. This introduction helps readers connect with the author and establishes certain information that may help the reader throughout the rest of the chapter. Before delving into the chapter, we have to establish the purpose, audience, speaker, and situation presented within the article. The primary purpose of this chapter is to express the idea that nothing is impossible, and that one should try as hard as they can to pursue their dreams, no matter how far-fetched. The audience of the chapter is readers of the book American Like Me, specifically multicultural Americans. The speaker is Cal Penn, an important Indian American artistic and political individual. The situation that is presented in the chapter is the process Cal Penn goes through of going from a young person being told that his goals were impossible to becoming an adult that has been able to achieve all these goals that were once considered impossible by those around him. In the first paragraph, Cal Penn establishes his main claim for the rest of the chapter, that nothing is impossible. Cal Penn does so by remembering the first time he ever boarded Air Force One, creating the base for the rest of the chapter by addressing the perceived impossibility of his achievements by others. He uses anecdotes, narrative organization, imagery, and an introspective tone in doing so. In his second paragraph, Penn remembers his middle school years as a high-achieving student, which he does in order to establish the beginning of his involvement in the arts and his hard-working ethic, which helped him reach the levels of success that led him to being able to board Air Force One. He returns to this point in time in his life by using anecdotal references to his youth, and chronologically following himself throughout the rest of his life up until the point of boarding Air Force One. Penn uses punctuation and informal language to emphasize ideas and have readers relate to and identify with him. In paragraph 3, Penn expands these previous ideas that he had established of himself as a high-achieving student to emphasize the amount of effort that he had always put into reaching his goals, and introduces the first instances of people denying the possibility of him reaching his goals, alluding to the main idea of the chapter. Penn does so by using his own anecdotes of his past and imagery, and he also uses longer sentences in order to allow for greater emphasis of the labor that Penn always put in when trying to reach his goals. Paragraphs 4 and 5 introduce Penn's college years and the struggles he went through as an aspiring actor. These paragraphs also compare the different groups from which he was receiving negativity, one of them being his own Indian American community. In doing so, he compares the effects different groups of people had on his life and the negativity with which they approach his aspirations. Penn continues his use of anecdote and chronological organization, and emphasizes the frequency with which he heard many around him state that his goals would be impossible for him to reach. In paragraphs 6 and 7, Penn begins to speak about his successes in his artistic career, and introduces his involvement in the Obama campaign. His successes in his acting career demonstrate the first time that he has been able to reach one of his goals that many have once considered impossible, once again alluding to the main idea that nothing is impossible. The sixth paragraph marks a change in tone, with the chapter becoming more positive and optimistic after this point. Paragraph 8 has Penn speak about his fellow campaign team members as how he reflects on his positive relations to these people years after his involvement in the campaign. He examines the similarities in work ethic and will and desire to reach quote-unquote impossible goals between himself and the other campaign team members, which he accomplishes through his illustration of the common feeling of fraternity between the team members and his use of introspection and anecdote. Through paragraphs 9 and 10, Penn writes about his involvement in the Obama administration after Obama was elected, demonstrating how he sacrificed his high-paying TV job on House to become an aide. He also writes about his and the rest of the aides' dedication and motivation to reaching their goals. He contrasts the various reasons why many wanted to become aides, stating that most of the aides were normal people seeking to help their friends. not people seeking out a coveted West Wing job or the ride on Air Force One that Penn was granted. He utilized introspection and anecdote to examine these ideas and put emotion to his works. In paragraphs 11 and 12, Penn writes about his and the other aides' stories of becoming aides, comparing them in that most who volunteered were young people taking a leave of absence from their positions in order to help Obama's election campaign. He reviews many of the objectives that had been accomplished that at one point were considered impossible, and recognizes the strength many had in pushing for reaching these supposedly impossible goals. Penn uses comedic and informal language in order to illustrate the pride many former aides have when meeting others who worked for the same cause as they did. In the 13th paragraph, Penn returns to the scene from the beginning of the chapter, where he described his first time aboard Air Force One, and explains some ritualistic customs that exist when riding Air Force One for the first time, specifically the phone call. He uses this moment of the first time aboard the plane as a symbol for all of his accomplishments that at one point had been considered impossible, and he emphasizes the importance of this moment in his life. He utilizes imagery to illustrate the rite of passage, and uses informal language to entertain readers and emphasize the emotion he felt when calling his parents from Air Force One. In the last paragraph, paragraph 14, Penn remembers the stories of his grandparents who had marched with Gandhi and his father who arrived to America with $12 in his pocket to better provide for his family. He compares his efforts to those of his parents and grandparents and recognizes the legacy of hard work and serving the community. He then emotionally appeals to readers to push for the same type of impossible goals that he did and work to help their communities. He uses emotional language and emphasizes the main idea one last time in the last sentence of the chapter. Thank you for listening to my rhetorical analysis of Cal Penn's chapter in the book American Like Me.